afternoon. It's a pleasure to see you all. We've got another lovely sunny day today, which is fabulous for a Friday. Today we'll be talking to Melissa France, who has joined us today after serving 20 plus years in the recruitment industry. And Melissa has been responsible for working with and starting up and turning around over 20 recruitment businesses. So she's got a huge amount of experience to share with us today, particularly given the environment that we're currently in. Melissa is also very much an inspiration, I think, for men and women alike, given the work she's done and the environment she's been in, which have been challenging environments where she's really had to show strength of character. And personally, from my perspective, I've seen in Melissa, as I've got to know her over the years, a very supportive and empathetic person. So that's probably why you've been very successful at what you've done, Melissa. And you've been a great support personally to me as well over the years when I've needed it. So it's a real pleasure to have you here today and to hear a bit more about your story, because actually until today I didn't realise you've been involved in quite so many businesses. So welcome, Melissa. We'll be working through your journey today, talking to you about some of the learns that you can share with at the Women in Recruitment Network that we've got. But would you like to just give us a little bit of background to yourself from your own perspective?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. So I'll give you a bit about my background. I'll try and keep it short. It's quite hard when you've been in the industry for as long as I have. But so yeah, over 20 years for my sins. And I, like quite a lot of people, fell into recruitment. I didn't do a degree. A lot of people that from my school went on and did degrees, and I didn't. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And I, like most people, bumped into somebody one day and they said, "Oh, I think you could do recruitment." So I find myself working for a company called Montrose. They were one of the oldest construction and property recruitment agencies, and they were 50 years old when I started over 20 years ago. So that tells you how sort of like lengthy they'd been around. And basically they became, Hayes invested in them and became Hayes's construction and property arm. I was there for 8 years. I started before the internet, when we used to have fax CVs. I've had lots of my employees calling me like Uncle Albert from Only Fools and Horses, like in my day, this is what we had to do, and they all laugh at me. But actually, it was a brilliant introduction into the industry. The training was fantastic, and I really, have nothing bad to say. I was there for 8 years. They moved me around. I did loads of different jobs, and I think I hit a point where I just wanted to go somewhere a bit smaller. So I went to a competitor, which was a company called BBT, who had been acquired by Vedior, and that was very much a turnaround business. I picked up an office that had about 23 staff, 5 of them doing nearly all of the fees and the rest of them not doing a huge amount. And that was probably, I'd say that was a pretty lonely first old year there, because I had to lose some of the staff and acquire and retrain. But we were in really buoyant market times. It was the early 2000s. Grew that office to 55 heads in 18 months, and it was all going really well, like really exciting times. And I think I probably learned a lot of my lessons, coming out of Hayes in those days. It was quite an aggressive environment, and picking up a business and having to, pick it up and exit people and bring people through. That was quite challenging. 2008 came along and Randstad acquired the group of businesses BBT was a part of. That was the year I got married. I fell pregnant, had a wedding night baby. You sort of say, should we see what happens? And it did, which was all a bit scary. And I returned back from my honeymoon, and it was a bit like someone had turned the lights off. I've never seen anything fall away as quickly as I did. I'd scale that business back to 15 in the next 4 months before I went off on maternity leave. And that was challenging. I was in a market that was really affected, and construction and property is a sector that is the last to go and the last to come back. Hence, it was so late in that year. So I have my daughter, and then I was actually made redundant while I was on maternity leave. These things aren't supposed to happen. So I did a year in healthcare recruitment, and then I was headhunted back to my old stomping ground of CMP, and I did a 2.5-year stint within Engage Group for resourcing group, which was like uncannily similar to BBT. I walked in and it was the same headcount, the same issues, the same problems. And I joined that business with a few more battle scars, I suppose, but probably the lessons I learned there was around attracting more experienced talent. We were in the middle of a recession and needed people to come and land and hit the ground running. Often people say that experienced talent doesn't work, but I think if you do it right, it can, and it definitely did. And we trebled that business in 2.5 years. And then I was headhunted. That group of businesses was owned by James Kahn, and he headhunted me to go into a startup investing in startups. So the 22 number sounds massive. In all honesty, we did invest in 18 businesses in 2.5 years. It was crazy. Not all of them worked. I think I learned probably the most about a variety of different sectors, and for me that was I wanted to get away and learn about other sectors in that time frame. Learn what worked, learn what didn't work, and then I did it for myself. I think one of the things in the last 5 to 7 years that's been really important for me is about that sector exposure, and one of the sectors I was really keen to get more to grips with technology. It was just really obvious that it was ever growing, not going to change. From that perspective, and that's what I'm currently doing. So I've got a really wide variety of sectors. I've worked in supply chain, audit, construction, property, NHS, healthcare, technology, FM, and I thought I'd seen it all until this year.
Yeah.
So a brief synopsis.
Yeah, well, I can relate to some of that actually. I think you were on cloud, but I might be Auntie Albert. But yeah, I remember those days myself very well. But it's also interesting when you talk about moving through the different organisations, how many of the issues and challenges were the same. And I mean, recruitment is recruitment, isn't it? And actually, the experience you build up, you can take with you, can't you? And you can apply in different.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and sorry, I forgot to say to the audience earlier, we will take questions for Melissa as we're talking. So if you could pop any questions through on the chat box, I'll try and fill them through so that we get through as many of them as possible by the end of today's session. So yeah, please use the chat box for that. But Melissa, you were talking about having been through one of the worst recessions back in 2008. How does where we are today compare to that for you?
I think that, being really honest, it depends on the sector that you're in. I don't want to sit here and say that today is any worse or any better than prior. I think I'm in a sector now that stood the challenge quite well. The nature of what's happened has meant that people remotely working and companies looking to transact online has meant that technology in a way has stood the test. But I also think that what's really apparent has been the rapid change in probably the objections that consultants are getting from their clients. Because for the first time, I think people are in markets where they were really candidate short, that all of a sudden clients have a choice. So they're having to, actually explain the value of using a recruitment business over doing it themselves, which I don't think that consultants have had to do for a period of time. I also think that, in some markets, they may be doing well now, but I don't think anyone won't be affected. I think in the next 12 months, it will be different times. And I'm not stupid enough to think that, there's people in hospitality, for example, that have really found it very, very tough. So I think my personal opinion is we've bounced back quicker. If you look at the stats, we lost 20% in that time in lockdown, but we bounced back by 7% in June, which was a massive leap in 1 month. I think clients are still recruiting. I just think that how you survive now and how agile you are as a business is key to coming out the other side.
Right. And you're now at Networkers, aren't you?
Yeah.
How did you end up landing there?
I think, what's really interesting, I was thinking about this before today, is that every single opportunity that sort of landed in my lap or come my way has come by someone I know.
Right.
It's been either, someone I've worked with or someone I've networked with or someone that I've consulted with or whatever. So along the way, and this was just, I did some work with a business that wasn't in recruitment, but that supplies to the recruitment industry. And they said to Graham, who runs the group as Group MD, you should meet Melissa. And that's sort of how it came about. I think, Networkers for me was a really interesting business. It was post-acquisition. It definitely had some acquisition challenges. Was in a sector I was really interested in. Was trying to rebuild in some areas and trying to really grow out in others. So for me, it wasn't working perfectly. That's why I was interested, probably.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you say as well how important your network was to you in terms of your career. And I think maybe that's one of the areas of advice that possibly might be given to the audience, is that over time, and I don't know about you, but it took me a long time to really realise just how important a network around you was. And I must admit, your network's amazing. Every time I talk to you, your ability to call out names and understand where people are and where businesses are has been way beyond where mine ever has been. But it's clear that you've really made an effort over the years to establish that, and that's come in and paid you back, I think.
I think so. I think to be fair, it's probably more in recent years than in my early years. I think I wish I had gone out and networked more. I think, you know, sometimes when you work for really big companies, they build everything up that your competition are the enemy, and actually they're not at all. We all operate. There's plenty of room for competition in the market. I think when I started my own company, there's nothing that focuses the mind more than when you start something and you've only really got 3 or 4 months money because you need to go out and win some business. So that in that respect, it makes you get out of your comfort zone and go and meet people, and then you meet people, and actually you meet people you really get on with, and that's what's been really nice. I feel like I've built up a network from that, but it started with a bit of need and then probably a bit more enjoyment. And I sometimes have to sort of remind myself, you know, have you spoken to so-and-so recently or whatever, because everyone's been affected by this, for sure.
That's particularly important at the moment as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, perhaps at the minute, as you say, people are probably a bit more open as well to establishing new contacts and being supportive, and actually that makes it a bit of an easier thing for us to do then, isn't it, in terms of reaching out. But
Definitely.
in terms of all this experience that you've had then, you've obviously created a bit of a formula for trying to bounce out of challenging times. What would be some of the learns and lessons that those experiences that you've had are playing through today, or that you feel are particularly important in today's world?
Okay, I think I've got a few. I think that this really relates to startup as well as bouncing out of difficult times, because when people start up recruitment businesses, the first thing they want to do is do a deal, and they have a grand plan and they have a name and they have all the marketing and all the fluffy stuff. But when it comes down to it, what often happens is by the time they've done all of that and started recruiting and started, you know, in the market that they're in, they often get a job in that's not in their market or not in the skill set that they decided to work in. And then it's a case of, well, I haven't got any other jobs, so shall I work this one? And it takes people away. And I think I can't, you know, the fear of missing out or panic recruiting, and that's absolutely relevant for where we are right now, for me is massively like what you want to not do. You know, pick your niche and stick to it and be absolutely laser focused, and don't deviate. Because the bottom line is, especially if you can get people working together and hunting impacts together, if you like, where they're all focusing on the same thing, you will penetrate a market far, far quicker than trying to say to your clients or your candidates, you can be all things to all men. Because what happens is you don't build a talent pool. So every time a role comes in, you're starting again. And I see that in so many recruitment companies where they maybe haven't got the fees that they wanted this month or next month, and they're worrying about it. So then they try and grab onto anything. And actually, sometimes it's better to have no fees and build a really good pipeline. And I've definitely seen that, you know, where I am currently, but also within startup. And also, if you look at the companies that have absolutely rocketed over the years, and I don't know whether I should name names or not, but there are some that have really, really stood out where, you know, I know a company a recruitment agency that operate in data, and they've grown tenfold in the last 6 or 7 years. And their consultants are not allowed to work outside of their niche. And that for me is the reason why they've grown. Because once you build out from that, you can operate in other niches. You've got the time and you've got the runway to open up different areas. I think sometimes people think that they're going to get more by doing more, and actually less is more.
I'd agree with you, actually. Yeah.
So I think for me that's just everything. Try and do less and do it well. And I always liken it to knocking down a wall. If you're going to knock down a wall, you don't knock bricks all the way across the wall. You knock in one place and keep going there. I think the other things now is about about really thinking about where is hot in the market. So, you know, I sat down probably in early June when we were starting to come out of lockdown. And, you know, I won't lie, there was a little bit of panic recruiting where I was at the beginning, because I think it was such a sort of very quick, you know, shock when we first went into lockdown. But we sat down and thought, right, what are the parts of the market that are going to be busy regardless? And we need to focus on them. So it's stopping sometimes and looking within your sectors and looking at the areas that are hot, and then being doggedly focused on those as well. Because there are areas that have profited massively at the current time, and there's areas that probably as we go through this are going to profit massively. And some of it's really obvious. You know, we looked at things like education tech, because everyone was working from home and schooling from home, and we looked at healthcare tech for the very reason. And you know, my daughter's just started high school, and I think I've got 5 education systems that she's been enrolled on. So that tells me there's an opportunity there. That's just one high school in the UK. So I think being innovative around where you're focusing your people, and then I think using innovation. We've seen huge take up from video technology. We're all sat on Zoom. You know, clients have been bombarded a bit. I think, you know, when the market's tough, recruiters go out in force. And we've just tried to contact or stand out or do things a little bit differently. And I think video technology, this is the new norm, isn't it? It's very cliche, but it is. It's not going away anytime soon. I think there's going to be a lot more home working, and I think people engage more in video technology. So we've definitely utilised that in the last few months, and I think that's absolutely going to be part of the future for us, for sure. Certainly where I am currently, and I absolutely recommend that to everybody else.
Yeah. Great, thank you. So obviously with what you've been through, you've taken away these sort of key learns in terms of how to manage work. What about your sort of mental health? And we've got a lot of focus on that at the moment. Clearly, with what you've been through over the years, there must have been points that were very stressful, points where you felt under pressure. How have you managed to keep yourself mentally fit as you've been on your journey?
That's such a good question. I think, like, firstly, just being really honest, I've not always been completely mentally fit. And I think with the focus on that, and when you really truly look back, there's definitely been times where I've taken work home and taken things very personally, and been, you know, gone home in tears and not enjoyed what I do. So I think the first thing for me is that you have to enjoy what you do. We do this for too long, every day and every week. We spend more time at work than with our loved ones. So that's massively important. I think sometimes as a woman, you can see like being concerned or not enjoying or finding things tough as a weakness. I think it's just not. I think, you know, and reciprocally, what the biggest instance of suicide in the UK is young men. So, you know, talking about how you feel I think, isn't a sign of weakness. It's really important. I think just for my own personal mental well-being, I think I've got a few things that just work for me, and one of them is sleep. It sounds really basic, but I don't operate well if I don't get a good night's sleep. I really don't. So I remember post-children that being really challenging, being back at work. But, you know, I am in bed at 10 o'clock every night. I always have been. I always will be. My family are night owls, and they always laugh at me. They're always like, "You're in bed so early." And, like, you know, that just works for me. I think it's really basic. I think I love food, right? So I'm a foodie. But I think, like, genuinely eating healthily, again, that works for me. If I've burnt the candle at both ends, I don't operate well. So those two things are just for my own personal well-being. And then I think just having a really good support network. You know, my husband is amazing. I remember taking the transition out of Hayes, and I remember walking out, and Hayes were really good at saying, "You'll never succeed anywhere else." That's how they held loads of people. And I remember that first few months in a new company where it was all different, and going home and saying, "Oh my God, is this ever going to, you know, this is really hard." And my husband's saying, "Pull yourself together. There's loads of companies out there that do brilliantly." And he, you know, it's that sort of like support of course you can do it. So family and friends, and, you know, venting over a glass of wine occasionally is always also well and good. I think the other things I've learned through the years, and this is going to sound probably a bit boring, but I think when times are stressful in recruitment, it's when things aren't going well. And recruitment is a numbers game. It doesn't matter what you're in it to agree it is a numbers game. It's about building that pipeline and putting enough in at the top of the funnel. And if you don't have enough at the top of the funnel when you need something to happen, it absolutely won't. That's always the case. Whereas you've got loads of stuff in there, loads more drops through. And so, I think one of my boring things that I do is I'm really rigid and consistent on trying to keep numbers consistent. Like, if you can get that bit right, the rest takes care of itself. And that takes stress away. I think people stress when it's not working. So I think those things. I think also try not to take things personally. This is a people business, and when people choose to leave your business, I've definitely taken it personally. It's my fault, and sometimes it might have been my fault, and it's about learning from that and making sure that you do things better. I think other things that have worked for me, like really early doors, I had a business coach who spent an awful lot of time with me working on how I interacted with others and how I could bring the best out of others. And there's parts of what she did with me that I've taken through my career that were completely game changing. So I think investing in yourself is really helpful. And I also remember, like, I've had lots and lots of training courses over the years, and coaching and mentoring and all of those things. There's a particular sort of like motivational training course that I went on early doors, where it was all about positive mental attitude. And I think, before I went on that, I was that person that if bad things happen in the morning, I could have a bad day. And they really taught you to choose whether you were going to let that affect you or not, if that makes sense. And that's, those things are things that can change your day, your week, your month, your outlook. That positivity is really, really key. So, I try and surround myself with people that are just as positive, because if you think you can, right? So, I don't know that question.
Yeah, no, that's really important. And it's interesting you touch on investing in yourself. And, I think perhaps the last few months have given people time to reflect, or maybe time to start learning and thinking about how they develop themselves. And that perhaps is a positive thing to come out of the last few months. There's a little bit more of a shift in focus around what can I do to help myself. But I absolutely would concur with you that if one can have that thinking early on in one's career and just be mindful and conscious of it, it can make a huge difference, can't it, to not only your own confidence, but your ability then to feel equipped to deal with things. And like you said earlier, we often panic when we don't have a plan, or we don't know what's going to happen, and we can only control certain things, can't we? And we have to focus on those things actually we can do something about. And one of those is how we look after ourselves to be able to tackle things. So yeah, I think a lot of what you've said there is really valuable. Really valuable. Interesting, talking about having a plan. And again, agreed, having a plan can help you feel like you've got some control. But at the moment, if you were advising either business leaders or sort of managers around, what should their plan think about right now? Obviously sticking to the niche, like you talked about. Things like standing out to your clients and your contractors, or hiring at the minute. Are people hiring? Are you seeing many people going about adding to their teams?
I think that, yes, I think, one of my major learns is that you should never stop hiring. And I think sometimes businesses hire to event, i.e. we've got it in our plan to hire now, so we're going to hire, or they hire because they meet someone they happen to like, and that person doesn't always fit with their strategy. And I'm a believer that, we talked about networking. If you're not speaking to people all the time as a leader that could potentially be great for your business, when you want to hire somebody, they're not there, because you don't meet great people all day, every day. So, I absolutely think that hiring is just something you should be doing all of the time, because the guy you meet today might not be right for your business right now, but in a year's time, he might be fantastic. or you meet somebody and they have such a great experience of meeting you that they recommend somebody else.
Yeah.
Or you meet someone that you've forgotten about, and then you see how much they've developed in the last 3 years. You know, everybody is a potential hire. And I just think in recruitment, you know, the job is really easy as a business leader when you have great people. I would think I'd far rather recruit someone that I perceive as better than me, because they're gonna make me raise my game. And you know, ultimately, if you've got great people, it becomes really, really enjoyable. So I think that for me, always be hiring is the answer, and that's just meet people all of the time. You know, you want them to walk away with a positive impression. You need to have a plan to be able to explain to them. Nobody gets on a bus without a destination at the front. And I think sometimes people go out and network and they're not really very clear about what the meeting's about. Just be really honest and say, I'd love to hire you one day, but you know, you're really happy where you are right now. That's fine. Let's meet anyway. And that's how opportunities come about. And I think often people say, oh, I don't know where that came from, but actually it's come from a meeting or something that you did 3, 6, 9, 12 months ago. So I would absolutely say be hiring. I think there's a lot of people that have been affected by this that through no fault of their own. You know, I've met people that happened to join companies in January and they hadn't had a chance to really impact. And then 10 weeks later, they're in lockdown and furloughed. And that's not their fault. And it's really easy to come up with it or think someone's no good just because that's happened to them. But why wouldn't you take the time to talk to them, meet them? So I have really tried to keep hiring and surrounding myself with the best people, because that's the best way to help grow a business.
And I guess that saying would apply really from a client and candidate perspective too, wouldn't it? In terms of meetings that you might have now where there isn't an obvious gain in the short term, but actually what you're investing in is building that network and that pipeline for the longer term. And I seem to remember, you know, years ago, we would always say that, you know, you've got to invest in relationships with people, whether you want them to work for your business or use your business, that ultimately the relationships are best built actually when someone hasn't got something to give you, because it's a bit more of a genuine conversation you're having. It's not, I'm only talking to you because you can give me something. If there's an acknowledgement that actually I get it at the minute, you might not be able to help me, but I'd still like to get to know you, and then hopefully you'll come back to me at the point in time where you're able to.
I think recruiters get a bad name for ringing up saying, have you got a job? And, you know, that you're absolutely right. You don't build long lasting relationships from that. And I think, you know, the business I'm in at the moment have launched a sort of, you know, looked around in COVID and realised the breadth of talent in the business that we don't really use to help our clients and candidates. So they've sort of, you know, we've launched a campaign we've got a mission to try and, you know, help our clients by using what we have as resources for free. And obviously there's a business outcome for us at the end, but also, you know, we are in quite difficult times at the moment, and there's people that have been really affected. So I absolutely couldn't agree more. And I think, you know, like we go back to, how do you do that at the moment? Well, you can always have a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting with a client and see them face to face. It's no different from picking up the telephone. So, and I think when we were in lockdown, I remember my consultant sort of saying, I've got through to this person, and they found it easier to get through to some people because they're working from home and answering their phones. And they were saying, we'll use you when we come out the other side. And they've really kept close, and we've seen the benefits and borne the benefits of that. So absolutely invest in relationships for all.
And you just touched on something really interesting there in terms of what you're doing at the moment to consider people's skills, capabilities, talents, whatever you want to call them, beyond just their day job and what they bring into their role. What human sort of capabilities or traits are you seeing are particularly helpful at a time like this?
I just think, like, from a female perspective, I think we're maybe a bit more empathetic than some of our counterparts, and, you know, use our emotional intelligence. I think just there's so many people that have been affected, and I think it's just about showing support and helping. You know, there's a lot of people. I think the power of the media has been really interesting, who've sort of reached out and said help. like I'm really quite stuck, and the response has been quite overwhelming. And I think we've seen that, you know, we saw that really early doors, you know, the communities and supporting the NHS and all of those sorts of things that probably a lot of us hadn't experienced before. But I think from a business perspective, we can take that out to our clients and candidates and see what we can do to help and support them. I think also it's about being innovative. You know, there's clients out there that can't afford contractors, for example, at the moment. And we've tried to come up with some more part-time solutions that they can afford, but that can still keep people in work. So thinking outside the box that can hopefully help some people, and we all achieve our objectives. So I think it's a bit of all of the above. I think there's an awful lot of webinars online at the moment like this that have been really useful.
Yeah, and it does seem to me that now is the time where actually we can start to be a bit more authentic in ourselves and start to behave like humans, whereas in the past possibly we've been a bit robotic and had to create a certain image that we felt we needed to create to perhaps fit in. But it does feel as though the world is a little bit more comfortable allowing people to act as who they are and as a human being, which is probably a really nice place. And to be fair, as women in recruitment, one of the things we're aspiring to do is to create or allow environments to enable us as women to be authentic and bring our whole selves to work. And I think, as you say, at the moment there's a lot of traits or capabilities that as women, we don't want to generalize, but we know that women do typically have a bit more empathy and a little bit more understanding often, and those skills are really useful now. And I think from the audience's perspective, it's important to go away and actually recognise that there are things now that as women we have in our back pocket, and we should be drawing them out now, and now's our chance to let ourselves shine a bit with them, whereas in the past possibly we might have been a bit shy about showing some of this empathy and care and those things that in the business world in the past might have been poo-pooed a little bit.
I think working from home has broken so many barriers because we've all been interrupted by an animal, a child, somebody else. My son walked into an end of week meeting with 50 people on it and was like, I need my jumper. And I was like, I've got all these people. He went, I know, but I still need my jumper. And everybody laughed, and it just broke the ice. So that's been really, you know, humanising has been really important. And I remember seeing there was a clip on the BBC where there was a newsreader where their child came in the room, and it was this big taboo at the time. And actually that's just become the norm now, which I think's fantastic, to be honest.
Yeah, it is. It's great, isn't it? And how have you found the whole juggling childcare, working from home, managing teams, connecting with your peers? How's that been for you?
It's not been easy, but I think it's weird. At the very beginning, I found myself sat on my bed with a laptop, trying to work, trying to get the kids set up, trying to, you know, do stuff. I think, you know, the thing that's been most important for me is actually about creating an environment or workstation and having somewhere almost like to go to work, which has had to be in my bedroom, as you can see, because being downstairs, it just was really hard. I was interrupted all the time. So getting up and being ready for work has been really important. I think that I was lucky and I wasn't lucky. I was lucky that my husband was furloughed quite early. So he did really help with the children and their learning. But it does take two of you. We're a team, and it wasn't all down to him. So I think, you know, I sympathise with people where both partners were working or whatever, or they're on their own. Like that's tough. I think people were doing really extended hours, and I don't think people have taken enough holiday this year. I think because they were working at home, they didn't think they could, or there was nowhere to go. And actually, I've seen people really suddenly like needed time off. So I think definitely I'm not going to say it was easy. I'm really loving the working from home now, because I love being able to feed my children breakfast, and I love being able to pick them up at the end of the day and do the things that I haven't been able to do for years and years and years. I've always had childcare doing that for me. Those simple things are really, really enjoyable. But I think I'm not, you know, remote managing was new to me. I've had a new learning curve. you set things up, and we had daily meetings, and in the morning and in the evening, but you don't always quite get people's body language over a video call. And as brilliant as they are, definitely I didn't get it right for sure, with a couple of people, because it's that short, sharp sort of like pocket in the morning, and then actually how they might have taken something you said, you don't always resonate or know. So I think I've tried to work quite hard on those regular catch-ups of like just dropping a call in, actually a video call, and just saying, how are you and how's it going? Because especially in an environment like this, being on the phone and getting lots of no's all day long can really set you back. And we worked hard at trying to keep people buoyed up, but it isn't easy, and I'm not going to pretend that it has been. So I think that those regular catch-ups have been really important. We've really worked on celebrating all wins, any win, no matter what it is, like really celebrating and making sure people feel acknowledged. And then we've tried to run coaching and development sessions. So it might only be like a 15 or 20-minute refresher on, have you thought about this, or what have you struggled with this, or those sorts of things. Or you've been doing this for 10 years and I'm sure you know what you're doing, but I might say something that you've forgotten about. It could be just as simple as that. So I've tried all of those things, but I think I've been in a way a little bit lucky with the childcare element. And then I've tried to work on the remote management piece, but I wouldn't say I've got it perfect by any stretch of the imagination.
It's pretty bloody difficult to be perfect all the time, though, isn't it? So that's the other thing we've got to remember. We're going to make mistakes, aren't we?
Far from perfect.
And so there's a couple of questions that Melissa, that have come in, if I could just ask you. So we've got one question that's asked, who has influenced you the most in your career?
Oh my goodness. I think so many people have influenced me. Wow. I think there's been a number of business leaders that I've worked for that I found really inspirational. I don't know whether I could name names, for loads of different reasons. I worked with, I remember when I worked at Resourcing Group, I worked with a guy called Jason who, when we worked together, and he was just absolutely brilliant in front of clients. And in our first year of working together, we were turning around this business, and he was out like pounding the streets. We were still in recession, and the guy that we worked for was a guy called Ian, and Ian had set up Matrix, which is one of the first sort of neutral vendors. And he was saying, you can sell a master vendor. And Jason said, I've never sold a master vendor before. What are you talking about? And it was that element that he took him through this sort of process of belief, if you like, and then through a relationship, and it was through a relationship, we won this huge master vendor. And I think those two people together, like Ian was like, that his ability to help you believe that you could do something was unbelievable. And then Jason's, how he went about it was fantastic. So they both really inspired me. And I think I look at Ian now, and he's become a pretty acclaimed sculptor. So he left the business and he's won awards. He's done some quite political pieces and had hate mail and stuff like that. But he was a huge inspiration to me, because I think he made us believe we could do things that we couldn't, and we did quite unbelievable things in that time frame. So I look at him. I'm trying to think of other people. I'd say probably that's one that sticks out. If another one springs to mind.
Very good at answering those questions either. I don't have a favourite song. I don't have a favourite film. I don't have a favourite anything. I just like a lot of things. So sometimes I think it's a little bit like that with who's influenced you. I mean, actually, sometimes you don't even know who's influenced you, because you've absorbed things as you've just been on your journey, haven't you? And sometimes you really have to stop and reflect. But I think the important thing really, I guess, is to be open-minded, isn't it? As you were with Ian, and allowing people to influence you and being open-minded to learn off others. And that's an important takeaway, isn't it?
Yeah, and I also think don't look at the people that don't have as much experience. I think there's one individual that currently I work with who was furloughed and was quite a junior member of staff, and during that time frame decided to take 2 open university courses, did a personal branding course that meant that she had to do a video on LinkedIn every day for 3 weeks or something. And honestly, the personal development that she's gone through in the last 3 months, she returned to the business about 6 weeks ago and has had an outstanding return. And I would not have called that 6 months ago. So, I look at her and think, you've done so well. What can we take from what you've done? And it's not some really senior business leader. It's someone who's fairly early on in their career. So
yeah,
I think it's
you're right. Yeah, often it's the people that you sometimes least expect, or as you say, that are not necessarily hierarchically above you. But I often, like you, find that when I look at people who are slightly newer into the industry, maybe have got less set in their ways, are a little bit more open-minded, not bogged down in kind of years of embedded behaviour. They have so much they can teach you, and I think, yeah, it's great to look backwards as well as forward, if that's the way to describe it. And then there's another question, Melissa, just before we come to a close, is how do you think, or do you think that COVID-19 is going to have an impact on sort of particularly that cohort of early talent that are in the industry now? Do you feel that they're going to be facing different challenges perhaps to pre-COVID world?
Yeah, I do. I actually feel quite sorry for some of the early talent, because I think they've probably been the most affected, because if you're early on in your career and you haven't really established yet, if companies have had to cut some numbers, that's probably where they've cut, and that's really tough. I think that that for me, that's about looking at yourself and thinking, what can I do to stand out now? About what you can do differently. I think in the the graduates that come out of university in the next 6 to 12 months definitely going to, this year, the people that graduated this year, it's definitely going to be harder for them than probably it was in previous years. And it's really awful, but it's about, I suppose it's a little bit about survival of the fittest. You've got to decide what you're going to do and be doggedly determined about it. I often say to more junior people, we've got all these tools at our fingertips from a recruitment perspective to find a job now, and there's job boards and there's LinkedIn and there's loads of tools out there. But if someone picks up the phone and pitches me for a role, I would always interview them, because they've worked out where they want to work, and then they've worked out who that might be the person that recruits, and then they've called, and I think, well, you've just played every talent that I want to see in an early recruiter. So I think it's about, I do think unfortunately they probably have been affected. So it's about doing what they can to stand out.
And like your colleague that you described earlier, who's spent time investing in herself, I mean, just because you have less experience, it doesn't mean you can't demonstrate how competent, capable and dedicated you are, like you say, by doing something about it. So perhaps for people who are newer in their careers, it's even more important to be seen to be standing out.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely believe that. And I think in the end, if you're really determined, you'll get there. Don't give up.
Yeah, thank you. And just before we close off, Melissa, it's been fabulous to talk to you, and I found it really helpful as well, actually. What would you have, if you had a final message for the audience today, given where we're at and the theme and topic of our conversation, what would it be?
I think some of the best businesses have grown out of recessions. So don't be afraid. Just because we're in tough times doesn't mean to say you can't build and grow something really fantastic. There's always another side, and we will be out the other side. We've been through, I remember 9/11 happening. I remember the 2007 and 8. I've been through some pretty tough times, and we've always come out the other side. I think finding finding your reason is really important, and without being too emotional, my daughter, she nearly died when she was born, and she was seriously ill, and we were told she'd never walk or talk, and she can walk and talk just fine. But I look at her and she definitely finds what other people take for granted really tough. And she is my inspiration, because she is the most resilient, determined individual. And I think, you know, what drives me is to enable her, I think, actually, because I think she'll go further than quite a lot of her counterparts that haven't had that situation. So I think find your goal, find your reason. It doesn't have to be something as sentimental as that. Write it down and use that inspiration to do something different. And if you can get up out of bed every day and do something like that, then you'll go far.
Great, thank you. Now, your daughter's probably achieved what she's achieved because she's got such an inspirational role model to look at. So probably would take something from that for yourself as well, because actually, you know, maybe you've given your daughter something through showing her what strength, determination, and resilience looks like. So you probably don't realise how much you've given to her in that way. But you've been incredible in terms of how you shared what you shared with us today, Melissa, and your journey is fabulous. And personally, I don't think you necessarily get enough press about what you've done, because you've had a huge impact on a lot of people and a lot of businesses, and it's really great that we can showcase some of that today, because it's a really fabulous journey you've been through, and I've been very pleased to have got to know you over the years, and thank you so much for sharing all of that with us today. And I'm sure the audience will appreciate it. There's a few messages coming through saying thank you. Found it really interesting. Next week for the audience, we've got Nikki Akuna-Akana, who's the MD of Ambition UK, joining us. Actually, it's not next week, it's the week after, but please do come back and join us for what will be another very, very interesting discussion, I'm sure. Have a fabulous weekend, everybody. Enjoy the sunshine, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Natasha.
Thank you. More thank yous coming through, Melissa.
Oh, that's nice.
Hello.
Hello.
That was great. It was a really good conversation. I don't think I can. I think I've given you all my powers, Natasha.
It seems to have disappeared. I was just looking a minute ago to check whether
if you go to panelists and then go to attendees, and then on attendees, if you hover over them, you can action.
Oh, I'm on an iPad, so I think it's different.
Okay.
We've got 5 attendees still looking like they're signed in.
Yeah. Oh, it's going down now to 3 or 2. Yeah, I found out from Jersey halfway through there. Once you make somebody a host, then you can't get that host rights back.
Okay.
You would have to. We've still got.
Right.
Melissa, thank you.
I'll go now, so I'll leave you to wrap up. Thank you.
Melissa, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been brilliant. Really enjoyed it.
A couple of weeks.
All right, good.
Good luck with everything. Thank you. Take care.
We'll have a glass of wine, Natasha. I'll message you.
Good. I look forward to it. See you soon.
Right, take care. Bye.
See you later.
Oh, where's my...
Yeah, we've still got a couple of people still on, but they might just have it on in the background.
Right.
The Nikki's actually on next week. You know, because we had to move this one, didn't we?
Oh gosh,
this was supposed to be last week, but it's fine.
Please. Sorry. Okay.
No, it's fine. Don't worry.
When I'm having to kind of remember everything and making sure I don't forget anything.
Yeah, that was great. That was a really nice conversation, actually. Yeah. I know she was speaking about Ian Walter, wasn't she, when she was talking about? Yeah, he was a great guy. Yeah. He started up. I think she was anyway. From what she said, it sounded like him. He started Eden Brown. You know, I used to work for Eden Brown many years ago, and he was like the founder.
Right.
He's an incredible guy. I didn't get to work with him for long, but I totally know what she means. He was brilliant.
Good. Oh well, no, I think she is fabulous. So that was a good call to get her on. So well done.
Yeah, she was great. Thank you for that.
That's all right. Well, I will see you next week then.
See you next week. Thank you, as always, for being a superstar.
Have you got much on the weekend going
on? No, I'm just catching up with one of my pals actually for dinner tomorrow night, which will be really nice. I've not done that for ages. What are you doing?
Well, Freddie and I are having a bash at trying to sort things out. And,
are you?
Downstairs at the minute, so just
okay.
So yeah, we're kind of having a bit of a reset, and so we're going to spend the weekend together this weekend, and see.
That's good.
See. Time will tell.
Sometimes you just need it there, don't you?
Well, yeah, and he's moved out now, so he was living. Now I've got the house back, I feel a bit more. Yeah. Got my own space if I need it.
Good.
Yeah, so we'll see. So
I hope it goes well.
Thank you. I will see you next week.
See you next week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.